Final section here in our revision video looking at expanding expressions. Again, we start with two key terms in this one, which is to expand, which we know means multiply, and simplify, which we looked at on the previous 5 questions. But there's a very big difference here, which is, although on the previous ones, if you look just above here, we've got 2 brackets, these were actually a linear expression twice because both of the brackets had a term in front of them, they had a factor in front of them. These 2 brackets are right up next to each other, and this is what's known as a quadratic. There's 4 parts to these questions, hence the name quadratic. The multiply sign for these ones actually appears in here between the brackets. So the question is actually saying take all of this and multiply it by all of this. We're still going to follow though that idea of doing numbers followed by letters followed by symbols. So we're still going to try and break it down into bite-sized chunks rather than trying to tackle the whole thing at once. We're still going to have to apply our rules of negative numbers. They're very, very important in lots of areas. So if they're the same symbols, 2 pluses or 2 minuses, that's going to give us a positive term overall. And if one of them's positive but the other one's negative, either way round, then that's going to give us a negative overall. And now we're just going to need to structure our answers a little bit differently. I'm going to do this by forming what looks like a claw when I do it, but I would imagine some of your teachers may have shown you the grid method with this. It doesn't really matter your approach to it as long as you remember to times each of the 4 parts of the quadratic together before we simplify. So let's start with 2a multiplied by a. So that's going to be my first part there, arrow number 1. So numbers, 2 times by, well this a is a 1a, we just don't write the 1. So 2 times 1 is 2. Letters, a times a is a squared. And then symbols, this is positive and this is positive, so that's going to remain positive. Then we've got arrow number 2, which connects our 2a with this part. So you'll notice there the 2a has multiplied both parts of that bracket. So 2 times 5 is 10. A times by no others is a. And positive makes positive. Now we need to do the 3 into both parts of that bracket. So arrow number 3 here, just a very small one in here, is going to be 3 times a. So 3 times 1 is 3. A times by no other letters is a. Positive makes positive. And then our last arrow here, and I hope now you can see why I kind of call this the claw method, is arrow number 4, which is when we multiply the 3 by the 5. So 3 times 5 is 15. Neither of them have got letters on, so there'll be no letters on this term here, and they were both positive, which makes that positive. So now you can see why these are called quadratics, because we've got 4 parts, but now we need to finish off and do this part in the question, which is to simplify. So we need to look for any terms that would be the same in this. So this is the only squared term in this, so it can't go with any others. So we're going to have in our final answer 2a squared. I know the a's look like they might be similar to this, but this is actually an a squared. It's not an a having something done to it, it is an a squared. So it's a very separate term to this a and to this a. That said, these 2 things could go together because they're both a's. So this says I've got plus 10 a's and I'm adding another 3 of them. So I'm going to end up with 13 a's. Please don't make the mistake of changing the a. This is just the thing. I've got 10 of them and another 3 of them, so I've got 13 of them. It doesn't change the thing that I've got, it just changes the quantity of them that I have. And then the plus 15 at the end is the only single number term in the expression. There's no other single number with it. These have got a's on them. This is an a squared, so the 15 remains on its own. So our final answer, 2 grade B GCSE marks there, is 2a squared plus 13a plus 15. So let's have a look at the second question with the same principle. I'm going to do 3b multiplied by 4b. So 3 times 4 is 12. B times b is b squared. Positive makes positive. Then I'm going to do 3b multiplied by 5. So 3 times 5 is 15. B times by no other letters is b. Positive makes positive. Then I'm going to do the 2 times 4b. So 2 times 4 is 8. B times by no others is b. Positive is positive. And then I'm going to do the 2 times the 5. So 2 times 5 is 10. No letters on either of those, and both of those terms are positive. Simplify it then. The first part, if you keep doing it in this order, you know has to remain on its own because it's the only squared term. The last part, if you keep doing it in this order, you know has to remain on its own because it's the only number term. The 2 parts in the middle go together. So positive 15 on my number line, add another 8, I end up at positive 23 Bs. Number 3 then, very similar to the first two, same approach, same 4 steps, but there's a negative sign in here to watch out for, hence why our negative rules are really, really important. Let's start with 3c times 4c. 3 times 4 is 12. C times c is c squared. This is positive and this is positive, so this will also be positive. 3c times positive 4, so 3 times 4 is 12. C times by no others is c. Positive and positive makes positive. Minus 5 times 4c. So 5 times 4 is 20. C times by no others is c. This is a positive term, this is a negative term, and a positive and a negative make a negative. So that's negative 20c. Take away 20c. And then our last part here, the minus 5 times the positive 4. So 5 times 4 is 20. Neither of them have got a letter term on them. This is negative, this is positive. Positive and a negative is a negative. So there's only one squared term in it, so that stays as it is. There's only one number term in it, so that stays as it is. But in the middle here, I've got plus 12c. So on my number line, I'm at positive 12. But then I'm subtracting 20. I'm coming down 20 places, so I'm going to end up at negative 8c. Okay, second to last one then. Let's start with that first term there. 5d times 2d. So 5 times 2 is 10. D times d is d squared. Positive and positive makes positive. 5d times negative 3. So 5 times 3 is 15. D times by no other letters is d. This is positive and this is negative. Positive and negative is negative. Negative 4 times 2d. So 4 times 2 is 8. D times by no others is d. Negative and positive is negative. And then our last one here. 4 times 3 is 12. There's no letters on either term, but this time we've got a negative and a negative, which makes a positive. So be careful with that one. Then let's simplify. 10d squared is our only squared term, so that stays as it is. The plus 12 is the only number term, so that stays as it is. And in the middle, minus 15d. So on my number line, I'm down at minus 15. I minus another 8, so I go down even further. So minus 23d. Okay. And then our last question here, a really typical GCSE question. They love to throw this one in to confuse you. What this question is not, before anyone thinks about doing this, it's not square this and square this. So before you think about going, well, I'm just going to write 4e squared minus 25, or even plus 25 if you remember the rules of negatives, that's completely incorrect. Okay? If you think about the rule of what does squared mean in maths, squared in maths means multiply by itself. So what this question is actually saying is a really cunning way of saying I've got this bracket twice and now it looks just like a quadratic like we've done on the first 4 questions. So I've got 2 terms here inside a bracket, 2 terms here inside a bracket, and I'm going to multiply all 4 combinations together to create my quadratic. So 2e times 2e, 2 times 2 is 4, e times e is e squared, positive and positive makes positive. 2e times minus 5, 2 times 5 is 10, e times by no others is e, positive and negative makes negative, the positive here and the negative here. These terms now, so negative 5 times 2e, so 2 times 5 is 10, e times by no others is e, positive and negative makes negative, and then our last one, the negative 5 times the negative 5, so 5 5s are 25, no letters on either, negative and negative makes positive. So if you think about the answer we had in red here a minute ago, we do have our 4e squared and we do have our plus 25, but we've got these additional 2 terms in the middle that you wouldn't have spotted if you hadn't kind of recognised that this was 2 brackets being multiplied together. So same process now for the simplifying. There's only one squared term, so that stays as 4e squared. There's only one number term, so that stays as plus 25. In the middle here, negative 10 on my number line, subtract another 10, so I go down even further, negative 20e. Watch the next video because we're going to learn to factorise, which is the exact opposite of this, where we're going to put these expressions back into their brackets, so we'll learn to complete the loop there. We'll learn to understand how one is the opposite of the other.